at my dad's will reading. My cousin Derek laughed and said, I already took the money and spent it, so good luck getting anything. The lawyer, Mr. Grant, just smiled and slid a folder across the table. You might want to read this first, he said. Derek's grin disappeared as he looked at the first page. Earlier that day, when I walked into the lawyer's office, something felt off, like a storm was coming. I sat at the big wooden table, my hands clenched in my lap. I wasn't expecting much from my father's will since our relationship was complicated, but I came to show respect. Derek was already sitting across from me, looking way too pleased with himself. He wore a fancy suit, a shiny watch, and expensive shoes, things he could never afford before. That was my first clue something was wrong. Mr. Grant cleared his throat. Thank you for coming. As you know, Mr. Porter's estate will be divided as he wished. Any questions before we start? I said nothing. Derek smirked. Nope, let's get this over with. I didn't trust that smirk. Mr. Grant started reading. My father had left a lot of money and property to be shared between me and Derek, but as the lawyer continued, something felt off. Derek was grinning. Then came the shock. The inheritance had already been given to Derek 6 months ago, before my father passed. It had been my father's request. My stomach sank. Derek burst out laughing. Oh man, I was waiting for you to find out. Yeah, I already spent the money. Too bad for you. I just stared at him, my blood turning cold. But Mr. Grant didn't look worried. In fact, he looked amused. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and slid it toward Derek. Actually, he said, you might want to read this first. Derek's smile disappeared. He opened the folder and started reading. His face turned pale. What is this? He stammered. Mr. Grant adjusted his glasses. That, Derek, is what we call a trap. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but I loved watching Derek's smug grin disappear. He flipped through the pages, his hands starting to shake. This can't be real, he stammered. Oh, it's very real, Mr. Grant said, leaning back in his chair. Your father was no fool. He knew you might try to take his money early, so he did something very smart. I leaned forward. What do you mean? Mr. Grant turned to me with a small smile. Your father set up a fake inheritance, a test. It looked real, but it wasn't part of his actual will. Derek never bothered to read the conditions before taking the money. I blinked. So it was a trap? Derek's whole body was shaking. This is... Mr. Grant cut him off. Yes, the moment Derek took the money, a rule in the real will was triggered. One that completely cut him off from the actual inheritance. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. So the money he took wasn't even real? Mr. Grant nodded. Derek jumped up, his fists clenched. You're lying. I spent it. I bought houses, cars, I invested it. You can't just. Mr. Grant calmly slid another document across the table. Actually, we can. That's a court order freezing all remaining assets linked to that stolen money. Derek's face went blank. Then he screamed. I had never seen a grown man fall apart so fast. Derek started pacing, running his hands through his hair. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. Mr. Grant sighed. Oh, it's happening, and it gets worse. Derek snapped his head up. Worse? Mr. Grant flipped to another page and tapped it with his pen. Your father knew you'd waste the money, so he made sure you have to pay back every cent. Derek fell back into his chair, breathing hard. I can't. I don't have anything left. That's unfortunate, Mr. Grant said, completely unfazed. Because our firm will make sure this debt is repaid in full. Your father insisted on it. Derek clenched his jaw. You can't get blood from a stone. Mr. Grant raised an eyebrow. You can if the stone committed fraud. I could barely hold back my laughter. My father had set Derek up perfectly. He thought he was being sneaky, but in the end, he had tricked himself. Derek's voice shook. I have a house, a car, but... Mr. Grant held up a hand. Not anymore. Derek froze. Mr. Grant gave a tight-lipped smile. Everything you bought with that money will be sold to cover your debt. You won't have a penny left. Derek sat there, completely destroyed. His hands trembled as reality hit him. And me? I just sat back and watched. This was the best day of my life. I watched Derek's whole world crumble. His face went pale, his breathing uneven. He thought he had won, only to realize he was the punchline to his own joke. And the best part? He did it to himself. Mr. Grant gathered his papers, ignoring Derek's meltdown. We'll give you time to speak with your lawyer, he said, but I suggest acting quickly. The court orders are already in effect. Derek swallowed hard, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. No, this is fraud. He pointed at me. He set me up? This isn't real. But it was, and there was nothing he could do about it. I let out a small chuckle. Oh, it's real. Derek jumped up so fast his chair almost fell over. I'll fight this. I'll sue. This is a scam. You can't just take my money. Mr. Grant sighed, looking unimpressed. It was never your money, Derek. It was a trust. You stole from your own uncle, and now you're facing the consequences. I expected Derek to explode, to yell, throw things, maybe even flip the table, but instead, he did something worse. He smiled. A slow, twisted grin spread across his face. You think I'm just going to let this happen? He said quietly. You think I don't have options? I stiffened. Mr. Grant didn't react, but I noticed the way his fingers tightened slightly around his briefcase. Derek leaned in, his voice dropped to a whisper. Let me make this simple, call this off, and I'll make sure nothing bad happens. Silence. Then Mr. Grant sighed. Threats. He shook his head. That's always a desperate man's last move. Derek's smile faded. Mr. Grant stared him down. I suggest you rethink your words, Derek. If you think you're in trouble now, just wait until the law gets involved. Derek clenched his jaw and sat back down, seething. That's when Mr. Grant turned to me. There's one more thing, he said. Derek groaned, slumping in his chair. Oh, what now? What else could you possibly take from me? Mr. Grant ignored him. He pulled out another folder and handed it to me. This, he said, is something your father wanted you to have personally. I frowned. What is it? Read. I opened the folder. My heart nearly stopped. Bank records, forged signatures, stolen money, and Derek's name was all over it. I looked up, shocked. This is. Mr. Grant nodded. Yes, Derek hasn't just been reckless. He's been stealing from your father for years. Derek's breathing grew heavier, his foot tapped rapidly under the table. You're lying, he said through clenched teeth. No, I said, flipping through the pages. You are. Loan applications in my dad's name, withdrawals from secret accounts, even a fake sale of one of his properties. You weren't just greedy, you were a criminal. Mr. Grant turned to Derek. Your uncle didn't press charges while he was alive, but he instructed us to do so after his death. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. I closed the folder, my mind racing. So what happens now? Mr. Grant sighed. Well, that depends. He looked at Derek. If you cooperate, we may settle this civilly. But if you fight, if you try anything, we will pursue full legal action, including criminal charges. Derek opened his mouth, then shut it. He was trapped, and he knew it. I thought that was the end. But then Derek did something I never expected. 3 days later, Derek disappeared. No calls, no emails, no sign of him anywhere. At first, I thought he was just hiding, trying to buy time. Then I got a call from Mr. Grant. We have a problem, he said. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The kind that involves fake passports and an attempt to flee the country. I sat up straight. You're kidding. I wish I was, Mr. Grant sighed. Derek bought a one-way ticket to Argentina. He's trying to run. A slow burn of anger built in my chest. Oh, hell no, did he make it? I asked. There was a pause, then Mr. Grant chuckled. No, he got caught at the airport. I nearly fell out of my chair laughing. Derek was arrested with a fake passport, a suitcase full of cash, and a fancy watch he forgot wasn't his anymore. Turns out, trying to flee while under investigation for fraud is a great way to get arrested immediately. And just like that, Derek went from a smug con artist to a wanted fugitive with no escape. The court took everything, his house, his cars, his accounts, even his personal stuff was sold to cover his debts. And me? I got exactly what my father wanted me to have, everything. Derek didn't give up easily. He fought the case for months, but there was too much proof, too many documents, too many lies. In the end, justice did its job. Derek was convicted of fraud, theft, and attempted identity fraud. His sentence? 15 years. I visited him once, just once. He looked different, thinner, paler, the arrogance was gone, he looked broken. You happy? He spat through the glass. I thought for a moment, then I smiled. Yes. And I walked away. I thought it was over. I had won. I had my father's estate, his money, his business. Derek was locked up, with nothing left. I was finally free of him. Or so I thought. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, I got a letter. Not an email, an actual handwritten letter. It was from Derek. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the best of me. It was short, and it sent chills down my spine. You think this is over? I have friends. You took everything from me, now I'm taking something from you. No signature, just that one sentence. I read it twice, my heartbeat sped up. It wasn't just anger, it was a threat. That night, I locked all my doors. At first, nothing happened, weeks passed, then months. I started to think maybe he was bluffing. Until the break-in. It happened at 3 a.m., my security alarm blared, waking me up in shock. Someone was trying to break in. By the time the police arrived, the intruder was gone. But they left something behind. A single playing card. A joker. Taped to my front door. I went straight to Mr. Grant. This isn't possible, I said, pacing his office. He's in prison. Mr. Grant nodded, looking uneasy. He is, but that doesn't mean he's powerless. Derek had connections. Small-time criminals, shady business partners, people who owed him favors. And now, they were coming for me. That's when I made a decision. If Derek wanted a war, I'd give him one. I hired a private investigator. If Derek had people on the outside working for him, I needed to know who was helping Derek, so I hired a private investigator named Brian. He was good. 2 weeks later, he came back with names. Derek had 3 main people still doing his dirty work. Victor Cole, a former accountant who helped him hide stolen money. Ray Bones Martinez, a violent enforcer, the kind of guy you don't want showing up at your door. Gloria Price, Derek's ex-girlfriend, smart, dangerous, and the real mastermind behind his latest schemes. Brian leaned back in his chair. These people don't scare easily, they won't back down. I clenched my fists. Neither do I. I needed to do what my father did to Derek, set a trap. I made it look like I was transferring all the estate's money into a single, easy-to-access account. It was a lie, of course, but I made sure the right people heard about it. It worked. 3 days later, Gloria Price showed up at my bank, trying to withdraw money with fake documents. What she didn't know, the account was flagged. The bank manager was already working with the police. The second she handed over the fake paperwork, alarms went off. She was arrested on the spot. Then everything fell apart for them. Gloria panicked and gave up the rest of Derek's crew to save herself. Victor Cole was arrested for fraud and tax evasion. Ray Bones Martinez was caught with illegal weapons and outstanding warrants. And the best part? Derek was behind it all, running things from prison with a smuggled phone. When the police searched his cell, they found written plans to steal from my accounts, break into my house, and even target my family. That was it. Derek's 15-year sentence turned into 35 years, no chance of parole. I didn't visit him this time. But I sent him a letter. It was short and simple. Checkmate. I never heard from him again. But I know that somewhere in his prison cell, Derek read that letter and realized he had lost, completely. His scam had fallen apart, his friends either betrayed him or got arrested, his sentence was doubled, meaning he'd spend the rest of his best years behind bars. I should have felt relieved, but I wasn't done yet. Even after everything, Derek still tried to fight back. He hired a shady, high-priced lawyer, the kind that defends criminals. Derek was desperate, he had nothing left to lose. His lawyer sent me a letter demanding a settlement. A settlement? The man who stole from my father, burned through my inheritance, and tried to destroy me was now begging for money? I laughed so hard I almost fell out of my chair. Then I got to work. I got myself a top lawyer, the best money could buy, but I didn't just defend myself, I fought back. I countersued Derek. For damages, for stress, for every single cent he tried to take from me. The case moved quickly. The judge took one look at Derek's history and immediately threw out his case. My countersuit? Approved. The court ruled that everything Derek had left, his personal stuff, his tiny prison paycheck, even any future money he might inherit, belonged to me. Every dollar he would ever make? Mine. Even in prison, he would be working for me. I sent him one last letter. It was short. Now you work for me. Enjoy the next 35 years. No threats, no insults, just the truth. Derek never wrote back. But I can picture him, sitting in that tiny prison cell, reading my words over and over, realizing he lost everything. Derek always thought money was power. He thought he could lie, cheat, and steal his way through life. But in the end, the law caught up, karma caught up. And I made sure he paid for every bit of his greed. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. And Derek? He was exactly where he deserved to be.